This podcast is supported in part by Carolina Forward, a nonpartisan organization that advocates for ideas, policies, and values to build a stronger North Carolina that works for all its people as a strong, diverse, multiracial democracy.
It's nice to see you in person.
Yeah, we're recording today in Hendersonville, which is where I live. We're like around the corner from my house. We're so close to my house right now. This is so nice. Thanks for coming out here.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. I think that I've walked had we not had all this podcasting equipment too.
I have almost never driven here. I have walked from my driveway with a keyboard in my hand to the studio before, like it's 1990, and I'm in the people's city of New York, just doing whatever I want. And I know pretty much everybody who lives like from here to the studio, so it's just like, there goes Gina, being weird again. I feel like we're like a little vagabond pod. Like we just record wherever will have us.
We just pop up wherever you find us next.
Yeah, pop up podcast. It's the newest thing. So what have you been up to this weekend? Why are you in my neck of the woods?
Oh, I'm in Nashville because this weekend was the state executive committee meeting for the North Carolina Democratic Party. We meet twice a year. I am a member of this 600 odd person committee because I am a chair of a county party. And so I and one of our other SEC members from Grayville came down here on Friday night. And we're basically in a meeting from 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. yesterday.
And how was your meeting?
There are definitely fun parts of it. It is really good to see Democrats from across the state that I don't always like see or interact with in real life. This one was cool in that we got to hear from the team. It was really nice to hear about the plans that this party has for the next years and years, and just that people are doing that work and thinking about what it's going to take to like win elections and build a better North Carolina that serves all people more equitably than we do right now.
Cool. It's exciting.
What have you been up to this weekend?
So I yesterday was at a public leadership training that was put on by the Poor People's Campaign of North Carolina in conjunction with the Center for Participatory Change and the campaign school at Yale, who does like kind of pop-up leadership trainings. And it was great. It was informative. There were a lot of people there who are interested in running for office, some electeds, some community leaders, some folks who do like housing or immigration or like any number of social justice issues. And it was focused on whether running for office is right for you, which is a moot point for me. But for folks in the room to think about, like, here are ways that you can engage yourself in public service that might be more effective. You could help somebody else with a campaign. You could organize in your own community. You could run for office if that feels right for you. So really just talking about ways to get engaged, what that looks like, what your presence looks and feels like in your perception. So it's cool.
That sounds really neat. And I like the idea of like, here are all these different active ways that you can get involved. Like they're all very participatory, but just like to differing degrees, because we need a lot of people to run. We don't need everybody to run. It's not the right choice for everybody. And like, we can't run this campaign if we don't have organizers on the ground working for them or volunteering either.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've talked to a lot of friends over the years who are in that same spot who are like, running for office, not for me, but I do want to help. And so it's always like, really what I should do is keep a list that I like modify all the time that has roles that people can fill that I like as I hear about them, and just like literally hand people a piece of paper and be like, okay, pick one of these things, call one of these 7 phone numbers for the thing that interests you, because there are so many ways to get involved. I feel like this is going to be, if our podcast had a thesis, I feel like every episode is like, the world is your oyster as far as getting involved is concerned.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I like you are now voluntold.
Yes. Yes.
You have been marked. It is your turn to step up in this way.
You said you wanted to get involved to the wrong or right person, depending on how you interpret what I am about to do.
And it also makes me think of So Anderson Clayton, I know we've talked about on this podcast before, but one of the things that she has said over this past year is like, young folk, rural folk, this party hasn't always looked like us, right?
Yeah.
But also, it's part of our responsibility and work to get in there and change it. Like, and it doesn't change without us saying, this is my party and it looks like me because I'm here,
Right.
actually. Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So after that training, I went to a legacy service for a friend and community leader in Henderson County who passed away a year ago. And it's a really beautiful like community gathering in her memory. And then ran home, fed my dogs and got dressed and stuff, and then headed up to Asheville to meet you guys for the serious meeting fun afters. So my favorite part of y'all having this meeting in my part of town is that y'all get to do the boring stuff and then I get to show up and have drinks with you guys.
it's true. That was
So
very fun. And thanks to the like Young Dubs of North Carolina for putting on an after hours event at a fun little brewery that we could go hang out in Asheville, because that was a cool time and I think much needed after a full workday of auditorium meetings.
yes, yes, that was High Wire Brewing in Asheville, which is a great place and they're great folks. So thanks, High Wire.
Yes, that was really fun yesterday evening, and honestly, it's been a full weekend of democratic activities.
Yeah. Super glad that we get to do this in person. Super glad that you made time in the craziness of this weekend to come this way and also to come to my house and meet my dogs. That was fun.
That was great. The dogs are great. Gina's dogs are really cute little loaves of bread, and they're adorable.
I love that that's on the record. I'll tell them that they got a shout out. So the General Assembly is now out of session for a couple weeks. So we can catch our breath finally and give y'all some actual updates. But the most fun story that I think is like universally fun, not just like policy wonk fun, which is, I know, not fun for everybody, is Shrimpgate 2025, which happened 2 weeks ago. So the overarching substance of Shrimpgate is that there was a bill that was introduced to stop trawling, and hundreds, if not thousands, of commercial fishermen and shrimpers came to Raleigh and like lobbied for themselves to be allowed to continue their commercial shrimping endeavors. Normally, I'm not into lobbyists making jokes. Like don't be cute with it. It's just we see what you're doing. Don't try to like manipulate me into like being charmed by your behavior. In this case, very charmed. There were people showing up in like shrimp costumes and handing out shrimp. And I think the handing out shrimp is ethically questionable, but it wound up the lobbying worked and they were allowed to continue shrimping away.
Two things that I thought were interesting about this were that one, I heard that there was like a permit or a discussion of expect 1,000 shrimpers
Yeah,
to come and lobby, and there are like 248 North Carolina shrimpers. So it was like a mobilization,
the shrimp
interstate mobilization of shrimpers for this. And oh, the other thing is it's House Bill 442. I like shrimp real quick.
Okay. Yeah, Jordan Lopez, our resident shrimp quoter, said that he felt like the bill was asking him to vote against people's income without having like the ecological data to back up why that was needed. So for a lot of folks, it was like that. I mean, that's pretty cut and dry, right? Like y'all probably didn't need to come lobby this hard, but you did. And I love that. I don't mean to like be a big shrimp stan, but if somebody's showing up to my office in a shrimp costume handing out free shrimp, like I'm gonna be amused by that. I think that's a funny time.
I think it's inherently amusing, right? Like the legislator is a building where like everybody's in suits. This is not a like polo shirt, t-shirt optional workplace.
Right.
And I am sure that all these shrimpers did. I mean, some people got dressed up, all kinds of dressed up, but I don't think that everybody got dressed up in the same way that is usually in that space, and just the overtaking of it. I mean, in service of a reasonable goal, right? Hey, this is our livelihood and you are severely threatening it. So like we've got to do something about it. Is, I think it's an example of what can happen when you mobilize. And again, objectively, 1,000 people is not that many people either, like relatively speaking.
So Big Shrimp won the day. I love it for them. Until or unless there's data that support. I mean,
I would very much believe that perhaps there is an overfishing and over harvesting and overshipping
absolutely.
that is occurring. And perhaps there are ways we could make some good legislation that takes into account those ecological factors if they are happening. And also the people who this is their work helps manage their ability to do that work. But I think what Jordan said is very smart about I'm not going to vote and threaten people's livelihoods if you can't show me any kind of proof that this is hurting the environment,
Yeah.
So where did the House leave the budget now? I know that we won't have a budget this year, and we've had extensions here in the North Carolina General Assembly. So what's called a continuing budget was proposed last Monday by the Senate before the January and summer recess. There's a healthy opportunities pilot called HOP, and it's on the chopping block this budget cycle. Impact Health, I think, done a lot to help the organization that you work for, right?
Yeah. So the P is actually for pilot. It's Healthy Opportunities Pilot. So a pilot program that supported through Medicaid the extension of lots of food and security programming. So the agency that I work for has a diaper and formula bank, and we were able to bill Medicaid for that formula under the HOP program. There's a food pantry called Caja Solidaria in Henderson County that also used HOP funding. There are a lot of agency impacts to the nonprofit circuit out here because we all expanded programming based on the Healthy Opportunities Pilot because it was doing so well. It was so encouraged. It was so supported. And it should have bipartisan support. And I'm not sure that even if it makes it through in the continuing budget proposal, that there would even be a use for it in the same way that it's been used in the past. So I think where the budget is right now is just leaving a lot of folks who rely on state dollars confused about what the future looks like. And that's the hardest part. Obviously, I don't want to have bad legislation, but I would love to have some.
I also just kind of feel like you said, this should have bipartisan support. I mean, I think a value that we have in common is thinking people shouldn't go hungry. In this supposedly great country, we should have no hungry children.
Especially, babies, formula feeds babies. Most people that it feeds are under 9 months old.
Yeah.
So there was also a Helene recovery bill that was fought over for forever. So since we're in Western North Carolina, it's timely to talk about this. It was just passed. It gave $700 million recovery dollars. It was this long-term compromise. The Senate and the House couldn't decide what they wanted. When that happens, things stagnate or go back and forth or sometimes die in a committee. But this is clearly an urgent need. So $700 million is what was decided on. Unfortunately, it did not include any small business grants, which is a huge deal because small businesses are suffering and unable to rebuild. You guys, did you drive down Amway Road?
We drove by the river and we drove by places that the construction seemed clearly rebuilding where roads had been.
Yeah.
Big roads had been washed out.
Yeah. So Amway Road runs along the river. So you can still see that. It's July. This happened in September. It's still so. I know that if you're from Western North Carolina, and you're Helene, we're exhausted. It's been almost a year. We're so tired. But if you don't live in an area that was hit by it,
the world has moved. A million other things have happened. Whereas if you live here, and you see daily that we're still not fully reconstructed, recovered.
Yeah.
And that's because most small business owners are regular fucking people.
Right.
who don't
Exactly.
have six figures in their pocket, or they also have a landlord who maybe has 5 other buildings that also got devastated. Like,
Exactly. And they don't have a corporate cushion to rely on. They have the money that they have.
yeah.
That is it.
And
There's
so
no backup money.
if this money doesn't come, then it's like, who closes? Who doesn't reopen? And it's a shame because I feel like behavior like what the legislature is doing with this shows a lot of people who are not like as passionate about the politics of it all as we are, that like it gives people this idea that like, what does government do? Government's always broken. It's never
Yeah.
working for me. It's never working for the little guy. And like it's proving those 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 beliefs that
Yeah.
people have about it. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like we could have, it seems so reasonable that we would have disaster recovery safety nets. I mean, it, nobody in the mountains expected that they needed flood insurance,
Right.
you know, like,
Right. We need to get Lindsay Prather on here to talk about it because she's been a great fighter. She's a House rep. And I think the most recent time that she's made me cry, something that she said on the House floor, was the first Helene relief bill that was passed. And she talked about the impact that it has had on the community that she represents, right? Which is her job. Her job is to go take the concerns of the area that she represents to Raleigh and say the people that voted for me, that asked me to come to Raleigh and say what they need this. And she does a great job of doing that clearly, with examples, with receipts, but also with passion. And the last time that she did it was when they embedded that Helene relief into the bill that also stripped powers away from the office of the governor. They did like an omnibus relief bill. And she got up there and like gave them very, very reasonable help about politicizing recovery and making recovery partisan. And she was dead on. And I was listening to it on my way home from work, and I like pulled over into a parking lot and cried because I was like, I'm so grateful that we have people who go to bat for us like that. Because you're staring in a room full of people who don't care what you say. You don't have the votes.
and when we say that they don't care what these Democrats say, we mean they are not doing the courtesy of like a little iota of attention and not fucking around on their phones.
They are
These
literally on their cell phones while she's talking.
these Republicans, or physically turning their backs
Yes.
from when she is talking about the recovery, that this, and like that, it's not an isolated incident. They
Right.
behave that way to the Democratic legislators.
Yes.
It is like, I am not saying anybody should be put on a pedestal or just given bushels of respect for no reason. But like, if we can do you the courtesy of sitting in this room and listening when you talk, you can also do us that courtesy.
Yes. If you watch any of the sessions, it's 100%. And being there, like watching it happen in real time, infuriating. It's infuriating. So anyway, that's where that is right now. We need more money. Thank you to everybody who is fighting for it. We see y'all and we appreciate y'all. And Lindsay's not the only one. She's just the one that makes me cry the most often.
I mean, wait, let's be real. I think that the bill that Lindsay Prather was speaking out about, that omnibus bill that tied Helene recovery to stripping the governor's powers, took some powers that are like shall mandated powers in legalese, like the word shall on these legal documents is like, you have no choice. This will be this way. And they took those powers of the governor to appoint people to the Board of Elections, and they placed that with the auditor's office. Now, this is a part of a many years operation of Republicans in the General Assembly stripping powers from the governor.
We recently went through, I'm going to try to give like the synopsis version of what happened last September in Hendersonville, right? But like the week before the storm, a woman who was on our Board of Elections sent an email to state legislators. And the email said, my name is blah, blah, blah. I am on the Henderson County Board of Elections, and I've served here for 6 years. It is my belief that if you do not intervene immediately, legally, or legislatively, North Carolina will lose to the Democrats come November, which will likely mean that we lose the entire country.
And that woman should have been removed from that board of elections as soon as it came out. Yeah.
So we all had the same thought, Liz. We all thought, well, that's crazy. Who would say that? Because the Board of Elections is nonpartisan. So you can't be emailing your legislators saying, hey, can you guys intervene in election processes?
You can't put a sign in your yard. You probably shouldn't be seen at a fundraiser for a political party.
Right.
You can't post on your Facebook about the politicians that you like, don't like, or have no opinion of. It is important that our boards of elections are nonpartisan entities because they oversee these elections, and like we're in a period of eroding public trust.
Correct.
Which makes it even more important that our boards of elections are clearly acting with integrity and that there is no even perception of impropriety. But that is not what's happening as this power grab takes place.
Right. So in September, we have this meeting at the Henderson County Board of Elections, and we're like, so there's an email. Like, what are we even doing here?
It's written down.
We have the facts. The chair is like, hey, we as a county board cannot remove a member of the board. That has to come from the state board of elections. So the state board of elections says it's not sufficient partisanship.
I would like to know where this line is because every time does something, I'm told the line is a little further to the left. And every time a Democrat even thinks about sneezing, they've already crossed the line. And I don't understand.
And again, this is the conversation that we have a lot about wearing different hats, right? As a human being, I think you're forgiven. You're allowed to email your legislators in any point in your life, and you should. The specifics of what she said in that email were leveraging her nonpartisan position for the benefit of partisan politics. And I think that feels very cut and dry to me. We all did this meeting and we're like, okay, like, this doesn't feel great. And so we're thinking about it. And then Hurricane Helene hits, and then there's an election, and then all this stuff starts happening. And it's like on the back burner until last week when the auditor makes his appointments for county chairs. Liz, guess who our new county chair is?
I shudder.
Yeah, it's the woman who sent that email. You guessed it.
How concerning for Henderson County as polling places and just general election integrity. It's great. We had a J6er as chief judge. Yeah.
Get me out of this timeline.
Yeah. Hey, y'all. I'm really excited to be talking with Reyna Walters Morgan, the DNC Vice Chair for Civic Engagement and Voter Protection. She is a Brooklyn-born and North Carolina-raised voting rights advocate and proud alumna of the University of UNC at Chapel Hill and Howard University School of Law. Reyna's tenure in this role at the DNC has been described as transformative. She revived a floundering department and turned the National Voter Protection Operation into a public utility. And I think on the wall, like behind us, there's an IWillVote.com poster that we would credit you for having that website working and all that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for supporting IWillVote.com and the plug. It's a really great website.
It is a really great website, and I'm sure that we'll be plugging it some more over this municipal election year. So thank you. So I know that you have roots from Brooklyn, you're raised in North Carolina. What are the experiences that helped you come to the idea that voting rights was the fight that you were going to fight in this life?
Yes. I had some transformative experiences in my life, but the one conversation that I can credit with helping me navigate my passion for travel and my passion for voting rights actually happened when I was a senior at Carolina. I was the student body president, and I was having a conversation with a gentleman named Walter Davis. For those who went to Chapel Hill, they might know that name because it's also the name of the library on campus, Davis Library. And he just wanted to have a get to know you conversation. He wanted to know what my plans were for my term as president, some of the things that I was thinking about. And so I was telling him about those things. And then he said to me, did you know that this campus is divided into 5 precincts. Actually, I didn't know that. I had done voter registration. I had worked with students to engage them, but I was not aware that the campus was divided into 5 precincts. And so we talked about that. We talked about how that was intentional, how it was meant to dilute the strength of the student vote on campus, and how powerful it would be if all of the students were in one precinct and how impactful that would be. And so we're having this discussion. I'm learning a lot. I'm frustrated because I realized that they were trying to dilute the student vote. And then he asked me one question that essentially changed the trajectory of my life. And that was, what are you going to do about it? And so from that point on, I made it a point to figure out what I could do to help change that process that just seemed so unfair. And what we did was to try and get the law changed. When I told him I was going to do something about it, I didn't quite realize it would entail trying to change the law. But once I started doing the research and figuring it out, like that's really what it took. And so that conversation centered the work that I ended up doing essentially for the rest of my career. And then there was another scenario that sort of helped shape me as well. As you mentioned, I'm a Howard Law graduate, and Howard Law has a strong tradition of fighting for voting rights, of fighting to advance the well-being of people of color in the United States. And one of the things that I realized was that the first Black woman who became a lawyer in the United States went to Howard University, Charlotte E. Ray. She graduated in 1872. So she was the first Black woman to become a lawyer. She was the first woman to become a member of the DC bar and to practice in front of the DC Superior Court. She was a trailblazer. She broke glass ceilings. She had not had the right to vote. And to me, there was just something fundamentally crazy about that. You are a lawyer. You are fighting for women and advancing justice in our community. And you are suffering the greatest injustice that there is in this country. And not only did she not have the right to vote in 1872, Black women didn't get the right to vote until 1965. And so that was one of the things that also really motivated me, just thinking about how there's so many women, so many people in our communities who are doing the work, who are fighting day in and day out, and who are still suffering injustices.
Wow. So when you say you were to change the law at Chapel Hill, was that how it ended up that you got a polling location? And do you know if Chapel Hill is still divided into 5 precincts, or if it makes more sense? Because that doesn't make sense to me either.
So that is one of the things that we ended up needing to do, is find a way to change the law. And this is one really interesting and frustrating thing about politics. It takes a long time to get things done sometimes. And so I started the process. I had conversations with my state senator, one of my state senators at the time, Ali Kinnaird. For those, again, who are familiar with the Chapel Hill area, just a champion of justice, very progressive, was always willing to have a sit down with students and talk about things that would make our lives better. And so I had a conversation with her, and she was essentially the first person I approached about the problem and what we thought it would take to fix it. And she was a champion of trying to get that satellite polling location and changing the law. But legislative cycles, if you're familiar with how the legislature works, they move at their own pace. And so I started the process, but it was by no means completed by the time my 1-year term was up. And so after my term was finished, I had a conversation with my successor and told him about the issues, and he believed in it just as strongly as I did. And he took up the torch and he pushed and he advocated, and it still didn't get done. After a second student vice president took up the torch, and he did the same thing. He had a conversation with the person who came after him and told him about the issue. And fortunately, he also believed in the power of the student vote and really pushed and advocated. And finally, 3 student body presidents into it, the law finally changed. And it was sort of a full circle moment, because I was working at the General Assembly at the time, when they did the ribbon cutting. And so I was able to go on campus and sort of see that full circle moment of something that we started and pushed for and were not successful right away, but eventually we got to a place where we're passed. I actually am not sure, because I'm not a Chapel Hill voter anymore, what the campus looks like. But what I can say is that this is a tactic that is still used. I do know that at least as recently as 2018, North Carolina A&T was also divided into about 5 or 6 precincts. So I do know that this is a fight that students are continuing to fight across the state.
That is, dividing a school like that is a thing that just like fundamentally doesn't make sense to me, because I feel like if part of how you are supposed to draw precincts is by community, right? That's a community. And okay, maybe it's so big that it needs to be divided into 2 or 3. Like I could see that being possible. But 5 feels really, like you said, intentionally diluting the voting power. And then to not even have a polling location by campus when a significant portion of the student population doesn't have a car, doesn't have access to transportation, like.
And that was always the problem as well. Not just that it was divided into so many precincts, but the students at A&T would tell you the same thing. The precincts were not always accessible. And so you want to always assume best intentions, but when you have challenges like that, it just does not seem like they're coming with good intentions.
It does not. So we've talked a little bit about the hurdles that you faced in getting that done. Were you able to be there when that polling location was open? Was that the ribbon cutting that you mentioned?
That was the ribbon cutting that I mentioned. And it was a beautiful experience, but also, honestly, it was a good lesson for me, because I think sometimes when we're pushing for change of any sort, we expect it to be quick and we want to see the results right away. And it was very early in my career that I realized that sometimes some of these fights take a long time. And sometimes you're not going to see the fruits of your labor. And it's really up to you to make sure other people believe in that vision and the goal, so that even if you're not personally there to help channel it through, that other people can help do the work too.
I mean, that really speaks to the power of bringing people along with you, right? And like movement building and not doing the work alone.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about building power in rural communities. I know we talked about this a little offline, not recording earlier tonight. What is your vision for the democratic growth in rural communities? How do you see us moving from losing here to losing by less to trying to win?
It takes time. And I think that is the one thing that everyone has to understand. It will take time, but I think there are things that we can do to help us get there. Everyone talks about being the next Georgia, but what people don't understand is it took 10 years of registering voters, of organizing, of having persuasive conversations to get to a point where Joe Biden won Georgia in 2020. So one of the things that I think that we have to do is to make sure that we have candidates running, and good quality candidates running. There have been so many times, especially on the Republican side, where they have put up candidates that really just didn't help their cause. Fringe candidates, election deniers. And I think some of the wins that we saw in 2020, in 2022 in particular, there was supposed to be a red wave. And that red wave didn't happen. And I think some of it had to do with some of the candidates that they were running, who were so far down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole that there were candidates who were running for offices who were not committed to upholding the oaths of the offices that they were running for. And voters understand what that means. And when voters are presented with crazy and rational, I believe that voters will do the right thing and make the right choice. So on the Democratic side, I think we have had some really good candidates, but we've got to make sure that we are recruiting candidates. But that sort of goes to the second piece, and that is to contest every race. We can't give anyone a cakewalk. Even if you were in a district and, it was a Trump plus 30, if you let that slide, if you don't run candidates in every single race, you don't give people a reason to come out to vote. Because there are people in the community who don't automatically fall in line with whatever the other side is doing. And so we can't give any free passes. We've got to contest every race up and down the ballot. And this is what I've told some folks too. When you do that, you're not just helping your community, you're helping races up and down the ballot across the state. So you think about this. Sharon Beasley should be our state Supreme Court Chief Justice. She lost by about 400 votes. If any one of the counties that, were traditionally blue had turned out a little bit more and voted all the way down the ballot, she would have won. But also in some of those places where we had uncontested Republicans running, if we had more Democrats come out and vote, then, maybe she would be on the court today. And so I think it's important for people to remember, like, when you're putting yourself out there to run for office, it's hard, especially if you're in a place that's a Trump plus 30 or whatever the number is. But you're also incentivizing people to come out to vote. You're incentivizing people to come out and vote for other Democrats, especially if there's a statewide race. And that's something that I think we have to be intentional about. So that's one thing. The other thing I think is really important in terms of organizing and mobilizing our rural communities, we have to show up in a meaningful way. I do believe that for far too long, the National Party has ceded ground. We have said, oh, rural voters aren't our voters. That's not true. They said, it's not worth it. It's too red. And the thing is, you can never move from ruby red to purple to blue if you don't take the time on the front end to invest, if you don't show up in the communities, if you don't support the work that's happening in that community. When you don't show up, people don't trust you. If they don't trust you, they won't vote for you. If they don't vote for you, you can't enact policies that would help voters in that area. And so it is a cycle. It is something that we've got to really reevaluate how we've been doing. But what I can say is that the new leadership at the DNC has been very committed to changing that. I have been on several rural stops in the few months that I've been a vice chair. Our new chair, Kim Martin, is committed to organizing everywhere, taking the DNC out of DC, which basically means showing up in communities, organizing everywhere, and doing whatever we can to provide resources to help communities.
So that kind of leads into my next question about like the role that the DNC has in re-engaging these places, right? I'm hearing you say like it's important for us to compete in these places. It's important for us to show up in these places, run candidates in these places. I know, the state party here is offering a base level of support to everybody, which I feel like is a way of doing that. I'm curious, like, what more do you think the DNC can do around those things? Because, like, we're seeing an exodus in some ways from these rural areas. Like, folks go to college, they move out, they move away, with or without higher education, and those changing demographics are not good for Democrats like Don Davis.
So I think it's really important to give, I don't think, overview of the DNC, but one of my colleagues said it really well when he said that the DNC is the organization that helps provide the infrastructure. So when you're riding down a highway in a car, you want the highway to be smooth. You don't want there to be potholes. You want there to be resources for you, like to get across the highway. And I'm stealing that metaphor, but that is essentially what the DNC can do when we're running at full potential. Sometimes that means financial investments. The DNC has invested significant amounts of money over the course of the time that I used to work there in communities and races to help Democrats win. So sometimes it's financial, but we have volunteer resources. So there have been some times when a candidate has needed support on digital or making phone calls. We can help add capacity to some candidates when they might need it. Like, I know everyone wants the financial resources, but money is finite and we don't always have the financial resources to give, but we usually do have resources in terms of volunteers, in terms of, the digital work that helps make campaigns run. So we've done a lot of that work, and I'm really proud. Oh, and I should say also, lawsuits are one of the ways that the DNC has invested and supported in many, many instances. Lawsuits cost money, especially the ones around voting rights. especially lawsuits dealing with recounts of post-election work. The DNC has come in and supported candidates who needed help in those areas. I do think it's really important to know that there are many national committees doing work, and everyone in the national space sort of has their lane. The DNC is not the organization that comes in and makes endorsements of candidates in primaries. We don't do that. We have not done that since I've been here.
Right. Mhm.
That's not the same for other organizations, though. There are, organizations, national organizations that might make endorsements or who might come in and support a primary candidate. The DNC, at least during my tenure, when I started in 2019 to now, has really been focused on whoever the Democrat is, what can we do to help them win? Especially in places where having that Democrat can make a significant difference. So, for example, one of the things that we did right before I left the DNC as a staffer was supported the recount of a sheriff candidate in Caddo Parish, Louisiana, who won his race by 1 vote. It went to a recount. It went to multiple recounts, and recounts are expensive. And so we were able to support that candidate in the recount. Crazy scenario, but actually ended up going to a new election.
Oh.
He won, and that resulted in the first Black sheriff being elected in that parish. And so those are the types of impactful things that we can help with. We might not be able to fund your entire campaign. We can't do that. There's so many candidates running, doing amazing things. But, those are the types of things that I think the DNC has done well in the past, and we want to make sure that we're continuing. But we are not the organization that does endorsements on the front end. We like to wait until we've got the candidate and we can put our resources into supporting that candidate.
That makes a lot of sense. The two things that are like sparking for me from you have said is the idea that like, yeah, money is good, but also like if you need a website as a candidate and the DNC can offer you some free labor that results in a kick-ass website, there's great, enormous value right there. And the other thing, as you talked about that sheriff candidate, you met our sheriff tonight.
Yes.
The first Black sheriff here in 278 years, first Democratic sheriff in a very long time. And I think like those races really go to show like how transformative somebody can be, somebody with or without a marginalized identity, but with desire to do great good in these positions of power. I know like we've already talked about it on the pod, but like Sheriff Found spent last year registering people in the jail to vote who were eligible to vote. There are a lot of cool things he is like doing in this community that for sure were not happening before that person with that identity stepped into that role.
Yes. It makes a difference.
Yeah.
And when people see that, when people see the impact and the transformative impact that they have, I think that's what wins people over. There are a lot of people who are moving away from pretty labels for whatever reason that is. And I think it is really our job to go in and remind people of what we stand for. And to go back to your question about, rural support, I think that's how you do it. It is one person at a time, one issue at a time, but really helping people to understand that we have the same values and we are for the same things. And this is why, supporting us and our candidates and, this candidate in particular, this person in particular makes a difference.
Absolutely. And I think when people do see candidates that they can believe in, they're willing to give a lot more of themselves to that process, whether it's telling 3 friends or coming to knock doors or making some phone calls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we think about too, especially on the voter protection side, is making sure that the laws are carried out equitably and fairly. I used to tell people, especially in the 2016 campaign, there were people who were not Hillary Clinton supporters. But whenever I would recruit a volunteer, I would ask them, well, okay, maybe you don't like my candidate, but do you care about democracy? Because that's what this work is. And so if you care about democracy, if you care about making sure that every eligible voter can cast a ballot and that ballot counts, then you should be helping with this work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great pitch for like get involved. I mean, and there are candidates to get excited about. Like maybe it's not your particular congressman or state house rep or state senator, but like maybe there's a town council member you're excited about. Maybe your state senator is really awesome and somebody worth being excited about.
Really amazing people.
Yeah. So one of the things that I read as I was like doing my research on you is that you had said that we have no luxury of an extended rebuilding period before the 2025 races. What do you think that state parties need to stand up this summer in order to be ready for our local elections in the fall?
Yes. So it's really hard right now. This administration is a dumpster fire. Every day there's some chaos coming in. And they've been very clear about what their strategy is. Flood the zone. They want to overwhelm. They want to distract. They're doing something over here, which is getting big headlines so that you're not looking at what's happening over here. And so I think one of the really important things is to stay focused. I often tell people that someone does have to be on Trump administration response or in North Carolina General Assembly response. That is very real. But 100% of the people don't have to be doing that. You've got to have those people who are going to respond. You've also got to have people who are going to stay focused on the things that will help Democrats win. Registering voters, knocking on doors, having persuasion conversations. This administration is doing so many horrible things. I guarantee you that there are Republicans who have remorse, who wish that they had known that the Trump lies were lies and that the things that he was saying that he would do, he meant. And so I think now as we're thinking about what we can do, like one, we have to stay focused on the things that will help us win and do the things that will help us win. Because responding to every dumpster fire, someone's got to do it. But we also have to say, as we would say in referring to an old civil rights docuseries, we have to keep our eyes on the prize. And so really staying focused, I think, is important. I think the other thing that we have to do is remember that we've got a lot of important elections in North Carolina coming up in 25. We've got municipal. Of course, 26 is congressional races and statewide races. But whenever we have some downtime here, or if we're not knocking on 10 doors a day here, there are things that we can do to help some other states out. Virginia, New Jersey have gubernatorial elections this year. They are huge elections because governors are on the front lines. You think about how important it is that we have Josh Stein in North Carolina. You think about the work that he's able to do in terms of, it's tough for him, but like being able to beat back some of that really bad legislation that's coming out. We know it's a very slim veto that he has, but
so slim we must constantly ring and beg a couple of people to show up and not be at the dentist.
Yes. But the work that governors do is really important. And so I've also really encouraged people, do the work in your community, but also if you've got time, cross the border, knock some doors in Virginia, or make calls, or do what we can, because we really are in this fight together. I think one of the things that this administration has also tried to do, aside from distract, is divide. And there are a lot of articles about internal fighting, about all of the things that are distractions. But if we're, sort of focused on our own individual pod of what we're doing and not thinking about the big picture, that also is very harmful for us. And so as we're going into the summer, if we're making our plans, definitely staying focused, knocking on as many doors as you can, making as many calls as you can, talking to your Republican friends who have buyer's remorse, who are feeling a way about this administration. Maybe there is that candidate that they're willing to vote for. Maybe there is that candidate that is speaking to them in a way that this administration is not. And really start having those conversations now. I guarantee you, if you talk to veterans, if you talk to people on Medicaid, there are Republicans who are impacted by that. And they need to know and understand that this administration is not fighting for them. And now is our chance to have those conversations with people. And now is our opportunity to, have those tough conversations, but with people who might be willing to listen. And I think that's going to be really important as we're strategizing about how we're moving through this summer. And then the last thing, of course, registering voters. There's been a lot of discussion about partisan voter registration. And and part of the discussion, and I think it's a very valid piece of criticism, is that for a very long time, the party has ceded voter registration to nonprofit organizations. They might not necessarily be registering Democrats. And if we're not registering voters, if Democrats are not registering voters, then we can't have follow-up conversations with them. We can't have those persuasion conversations
Because they're not in our
because they're not in our universe. And so really being intentional about what partisan voter registration looks like. Now, it's not going to be easy. It is going to have to be something that we're very intentional about. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes resources, it takes people, but it's something that's worth it. And I think that there will be a lot more conversation about what that looks like at the state level, but also how at the national level we can support those efforts.
Cool. Yeah, no, I love that. I got trained on partisan voter registration with an organization called Field Team 6 that was
Yes.
yeah, Jason Berlin's organization. Really cool stuff. A lot of going to the community colleges, going to in Los Angeles, it was like the Busy Ralphs, but here it's the Food Lion, you know.
Ralph's, yes, I've heard that. Yeah.
But I am a fan of the partisan voter registration work as long as we are allowed to do it. I mean, I think it's worth noting
Right.
in North Carolina that the North Carolina General Assembly, specifically the Republicans in control of it, are trying to make it essentially impossible for you to go and help other people to register to vote out of the kindness of your volunteering heart, which really sucks.
Because they don't want to focus on policies that are going to help make people's lives better. So instead of doing that, they just want to limit people who can vote.
Yeah. And that's a shame. Like I would genuinely love for the opposition party to be on the same page. More people voting is a good thing. It
used to be
actually
that way.
is for them, or at least it has been, as it turned out. Like, yeah, no, it's
Well, and it used to be that transition really happened with Trump because I'm showing my age here, but when George W. Bush was president, like he reauthorized the Voting Rights Act. There were Republicans for a period of time. Like I believe I've seen quotes with Mitch McConnell saying that, reauthorizing the Voting Rights Act was very important. And then we have Trump coming into office and their whole posture changed. It's problematic, but it's also very interesting, like for those organizations that do like, hey, you said this 10 years ago. Now what are you saying? There are a lot of Republicans who are on record having supported voting rights, but that's not where they are now, and it's very unfortunate.
yeah, no, it's really, really genuinely such a shame. We've talked about it, but at least one recording, but it's just a shame that Democrats have to be the party of we believe people should vote, and that's controversial. Like we believe people should have access to the right to vote, and that's somehow controversial.
The Constitution is controversial under this administration, so
That a fair point. Fair point for young activists listening, particularly like students at UNC or NC Central or like our local community colleges. Do you have a skill or a mindset that you would recommend mastering to help deal with the times that we are living in?
skill or mindset, patience, I think is really, really important, especially with social media, especially with being so technologically savvy. A lot of us want the instant gratification. I don't want to watch a commercial. I want to fast forward through it, or I want things very quickly. And unfortunately, sometimes that's not the political process. Sometimes it takes a long time to get things done. I'm not saying that that's right, and I'm not even saying that it's reasonable, but I think it's really easy to get discouraged sometimes when people understand or see how slow and inefficient processes are. And so I would definitely suggest patience as being one thing to really get a big dose of if you're in this work. And I would also say tenacity, because I'm a Black woman. I am a vice chair at the DNC. I was a director of a department at a DNC. There have been many times that I was the only in a space, the only in a conversation, the only in a meeting. Part of the reason why I went into voter protection work and wanted to do this work at the national level was because I saw that a lot of times our volunteers did not reflect the communities that they were serving. And I don't want people to talk about me. I want them to talk to me. I want a seat at the table. And I think that we have to have more women, more people of color, more young people at the table to do that. But it was not easy to get to this point. I can tell you story after story after story of being disrespected, of people mansplaining things to me, of people doubting my credentials or my ability. Politics can be a very hard space to be in. And so you've got to come to it with a thick skin. You've got to come to it with the knowledge that it's going to be hard, but if you do it right, you can really have an impact. And at least for me, I've also come to it with the perspective of now that I'm in this place, in this space, it is my responsibility to help make the path easier for people who will come behind me. I did not have that luxury. There were no red carpets rolled out for me upon my arrival. It was hard, and even from people that I thought would support did not. And so you got to sort of go into it knowing that this work is hard. It's not going to be easy. Sometimes you're going to have to fight really, really hard for your space at the table, but you deserve to be there. Your voice has to be there. And once you're there, we've got to make sure that we are changing the path so that it's easier for other people coming behind us.
We talk about a little culture on this podcast, books and music and art and things like that. So what's a book or song or piece of art that is something that you go to for like steadiness and centering when the voter suppression and the work feels a little overwhelming?
So I have a playlist that I call You Got This. And it is a list of songs that help give me inspiration and motivation and encouragement when I need it. So there's a lot of Sia on there. Unstoppable, Titanium. I think she did that as a collaboration. I've got T.I. on there, Motivation, DJ Khaled, All I Do Is Win. Like, these are just those songs. Oh, I've got some Destiny's Child, Survivor on there.
It's like a good workout playlist too.
It's also a good workout playlist. But that is a playlist that sometimes when, people are getting me down, this administration is doing something crazy, it helps me like stay positive and sort of give myself that confidence of like, you can do this, you can make a difference, you can face the world today. So I have that playlist. And I also have a book that is a faith-based book. It's by Rick Warren, and it's called The Purpose-Driven Life.
Mm-hmm.
And Purpose-Driven Life, what on earth are you here for? And it's in different chapters, but a lot of it talks about living and working and moving in your purpose, figuring out what your purpose is, and what to do when you are in that purpose. And to me, that is also really helpful because politics is hard. This administration is crazy. There are times when, I wonder, like, how can I keep doing this? And what happens if we're not successful? Like, what does that look like? Failure is not an option. So how do we move forward? And for me, as a person of faith, that gives me like the grounding of sort of reiterating what I think that what I had already known, but has sort of like reinforced is that I am doing purpose-driven work. And there are a lot of things that might come up that are difficult or hard, but when you're moving in your purpose and you're working in your purpose and living in your purpose, that's okay because you've got more behind you to support you in the work and moving in your day-to-day life. So that book has been immensely helpful. I've read it multiple times, and sometimes I'll just pick up the book and read a chapter, and I think it's really helpful, at least for reminding me that I'm doing the work that I'm supposed to be doing.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is so awesome.
Yay. It really was. I really enjoyed talking with you. I know we did a little bit more than I said we were going to time wise, but
It's fine.
thank you for hanging
I'm a
out late
talker
night.
too. I should have warned you.
No, I could.